Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In today's episode we're going to deal with why Nichol Kessinger looked up the expiration date on a box of condoms. This issue I want to give credit to another YouTuber who brought it up, but at the same time when I was listening to what she was saying I was sort of a little bit confused because some of what she said was a little bit confusing. I think she mentioned that the statement was made to Tammy Lee. It wasn't. It was made to Detective Baumhover. But in any event, I went and had a look at the discovery, and I thought it was worth myth busting a couple of things and then answering a question that this YouTuber actually posed. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. Today the Patrick Frazee trial, which I'm providing ongoing coverage for, we're in the third week of that trial, and the trial will probably wrap up sometime this week. So got off to a little bit of a late start today. It's likely to get technical today, dealing with DNA, blood test results, forensics, crime scene analysis, all the stuff of True Crime Rocket Science. So look out for the video of that, the wrap up of trial day 7. I'm also working on a book on that case which will hopefully be due out before the end of the month. But before we get to today's episode, this episode referring to the Google search for the expiration date of the condoms, please subscribe, please like, share, ring the bell and leave a comment, and let's get started. So again, for those more impatient among you, you might want to have a quick answer to the question why she searched for the condom expiration dates. I'm not going to provide that here, but if you sort of jump to near the end, you'll probably get the quick answer. When you do a Google search for the words condoms expiration, we'll get to the discovery that deals with this. It's quite clear that there's basically two kind of options. The one option is that there's a 5-year expiration date from the time of manufacture, and then there's also a 3-year expiration date when the condoms contain spermicide. Now basically what you can do is you can sort of backdate these expiration dates to know when they were purchased. So if you've got a box in your hands and it's a certain year, you can tell how old the condoms are, right? And we'll deal with the implications of that. Now, what was a bit weird for me when this particular YouTuber was talking about this particular issue was she referred to a page in the discovery which I think refers to the sort of PDF page, which I find a little bit it's a bit confusing because it's much easier, well certainly for me, and I've been researching this case for over a year, to reference the actual discovery page numbers. So the actual discovery page number for this reference is 1059. The YouTuber gave the PDF page number, which I don't know, I just found it more difficult to find that way. I'm not sure how you guys feel about it. The other aspect, as I mentioned, was that she mentioned that this was information given to CBI agent Tammy Lee, but it was actually taken by notes taken or given to or received by Detective Baumhover. What's interesting, when you refer to the discovery firsthand, the interview between the detective and Kessinger happened as late as the 5th of September 2018. So that's a good 3 weeks after the incident. And what effectively was going on here was sort of a handover from CBI agent Kobach to the detective. And again, in the discovery you can see that it's clearly that's the case. It's Detective Baumhover dealing with it. There's also a little information about where Kessinger lives, or lived at the time, in North Glen. And then we just get a little bit of context for this meeting, that it actually happened. I think he wrote the report on the 5th, but they actually met on the 4th of September at around about 1 o'clock, and they met at CBI headquarters, not at Frederick Police Station, on 690 Kipling Street in Lakewood, Colorado. There Baumhover was introduced by Kobach, who had at that stage obviously interviewed Kessinger several times. And so it seems like this was the first time Kobach actually met Kessinger. Sorry, Detective Baumhover actually met Kessinger. And in this meeting, Baumhover told Kessinger that he was now her point of contact going forward, and Kobach was now being reassigned. And Kessinger, I guess on the record, acknowledged this, and then handed Baumhover, obviously following all the relevant protocols, probably signing documents and whatever. But Kessinger then handed over a 7-page typed document that she generated, with notes of events that she'd recalled since her last meeting with Kobach. The events were basically a timeline, and they referred to her relationship, everything she could remember, between the 25th of June and the 13th of August, which is obviously the day that Watts disposed of his family. So this was effectively a timeline, but just think about it. This timeline was only really handed over, whether you want to say it to Kobach or to the detective, 3 weeks after the incident. So it took her quite a long time to compile this timeline, and one could argue, if you wanted to, why couldn't this timeline have been compiled like on day one, like right in the beginning? And so obviously it had taken quite a few meetings with Kobach to sort of gain Kessinger's trust, and then also get her to this point where she would volunteer to do some soul searching and just go through a memory and then jot down quite a detailed sort of report. Now, as I say, you're free to go and check this information yourself on around about page 1059, 1060, etc. of the discovery. What's interesting is, when I went to check this information, I googled the word, it's not googled, I did a document search of the word expiration, and nowhere does it actually, it doesn't actually register. In other words, for some reason this part of the document simply isn't searchable. I also googled the word condoms, and it also didn't pick up in the document search. Yeah, and so if you do a condom search of the document, it just comes up with absolutely nothing, and yet it is referred to in the document. And so let's go to that reference, and it refers to the timeline that Nichol set up, going quite far back in time to the 27th of June, and her notes are bulleted and they're quite specific, and let's go through them one by one. It starts off, CW brings condoms to my house. So this is 27th of June. One box is full and unopened. The second is a set of condoms from a partially used box. Now, there's no information given that this is the first time that they are intimate together, but certainly the fact that he's bringing 2 boxes is quite amusing. It looks like there was an expectation of quite a lot of activity, certainly from his side. And then you get the quite frank disclosure from Kessinger here on quite a sort of personal issue, which she's now disclosing to these two men. I mean, she's giving this information. I'm not sure whether Kobach had read it, maybe he'd reviewed it and thought, well, there's nothing really much to go on. Then it was Baumhover's turn, but it's still, you know, giving some quite personal information over to these sort of older men. And so part of it is she asked why he had a set of partially used condoms, meaning, you know, why is the box open? And the implications of the question is obviously, you know, have you been sleeping with anyone else, including your wife? You know, are you still in love with her? Is our sexual relationship exclusive? You know, do I have to worry about any health aspects? You know, what's going on here? What is your sexual history? And then she wrote that Watts had informed her that the condoms in his possession were from back when he was still having sex with his wife. So he's basically just saying here that he last had sex with his wife a long time ago, and he'd bought the condoms a long time ago. They weren't really bought for, presumably they weren't bought for Kessingers for use. Sorry, it's not the best way of expressing it, but I think you know what I'm getting at. He didn't buy it for that day. It was something he had, I guess you could say, in storage. And that's what he confirms. He tells her that they'd been sitting in a closet collecting dust, and Shanann probably didn't even know that they were still there. That does seem like a verbatim quote. There's something very symbolic in that description, especially given where we're sitting today, you know, a year later. This idea of condoms sitting in a closet gathering dust, and Shanann not even knowing if they're still there. You know, the condoms in a way are symbolic of vitality, of it's almost like Christmas gifts are a symbol of the joy of Christmas and the spirit of Christmas. Condoms are in a way a symbol of the vitality of a romantic relationship. You know, if these little sort of bright colored boxes and sort of foil wrapped, almost like sweet wrapped condoms are in the picture, then it tends to mean that a relationship is going well and that things are happening and that there's you know, interesting activities going on, enjoyable presumably. And what Watts is sort of saying is that in terms of his relationship with Shanann, that aspect was sitting in a closet collecting dust, and that's an analogy for what was happening to him. I think in a way he was sitting in a closet collecting dust, or one could say his sexual life, right? You can say that that's not believable, or you don't believe it, or you're just saying what Kessinger wanted to hear, and maybe that's true. But it's still, nevertheless, I think, an interesting thought and an interesting perspective. To be even more explicit, what Watts is trying to say here is that his sexual life with Shanann was non-existent. And it's difficult to know what to make of this, because she was giving a totally different account to especially Nicole Atkinson, who actually used the term in her interview with Agent Zentner that they were having sex like rabbits and that they couldn't get enough of each other. That this seems to be an exaggeration from her. Maybe it's not, but yeah, you know, that's one aspect where one's got to use your own discernment. I mean, why would he be cheating on Kessinger, and why would he have these boxes of condoms if he was sexually fulfilled, right? And you can see that in this short little excerpt from, I guess, the timeline of the 27th of June. Kessinger sort of giving what's the third degree. She sort of maybe has legitimate concerns in terms of health issues, but she's also got other concerns which, as a mistress, she's sort of wondering, what does this mean? You know, what is actually going on? What's going on with you and your wife? What's actually going on? You know, like what is the story behind the story? And so she asks him, you know, why are they even using condoms? And that's a fair question, because, you know, often in long-term committed relationships, there's kind of an agreement with some couples to forego condoms in favor of things like using the pill. Some people use the injection method and so on. And so Kessinger sort of wondering why would he be having sex with his wife using a condom? And Watts then says that Shanann didn't like to get messy. Now, I know this is a bit of a delicate area, but this sort of requires someone to have a good knowledge of Shanann as a person, as an individual, as a personality, and as a character. And we see, whenever we see her in Thrive videos, she's made up, she's well dressed, and her presentations are actually quite well done. You can, if you compare her presentations, say, to Nicole Atkinson's, they just Shanann's are quite polished. If you look at Shanann's home, it's very polished. Things are in boxes and in labels, and she's kind of a controlling personality. And if you accept Shanann's health concerns in terms of lupus, her anxiety in terms of her health, her fibromyalgia and all that kind of thing, if you accept that this was something that was truly bothering her, it was truly a concern, things like inflammation and infections were a real worry for her, something that she was maybe apprehensive about, then one can see that maybe that there would be some truth in this thing of that she didn't want to get messy. And I don't want to go into my sexual background, but I'm sure you guys can relate this to yours. There are some people that you encounter in your life who have certain etiquettes in terms of let's just call it messiness, right? We know what that's about, and some people are more let's just say free-spirited in that department, and some are lesser. Some are quite sort of strict in taking a shower and all that kind of thing, and getting a sexual record of even a medical examination before, etc., etc. And this brings us to the point of this video, which is Kessinger admits that she was curious. She doesn't say really about what, she's not really specific, but she said she looked up the expiration date on the condoms and noted the unopened set expired in late 2022, and that the open set expired in early 2023. And she then looked up the lifespan of the unopened condom and discovered it is approximately 5 years. And then she says, based on her research, and this is, basically it assumes that she searched online, she just did a Google search, she assumed that the condoms were manufactured in late 2017 and early 2018, right? And this brings us to the YouTuber who sort of brought this up, and just addressing the question. I think the YouTuber was sort of speculating whether weren't the condoms just Kessinger's, and why didn't she just say so? I don't think they were, and I think the reason she would have searched it, I think, is fairly obvious. I'm sure many of you would guess it yourselves. It's just basically that she would be able to infer from the dates that the condoms were about to expire, what the dates were that they were bought, and that those dates would then also point to when last Chris Watts was buying condoms for use at home, within the marriage. And it does make sense that they were bought late 2017 and early 2018 and not after that, simply because we know when Nico was conceived, it was in early 2018, and obviously after a certain point in early 2018 they weren't using condoms, right, in order for Shanann to conceive. And so what this would have addressed for Nichol was if the condoms were going to expire really late, say in mid 2018 or something like that, it would have suggested, especially if the boxes were open, it would have suggested that he had recently been involved in a sexual activity with someone else, whether it was his wife or someone else, and this probably would have concerned her, as it would have concerned anyone who's about to probably have a new encounter. And so I think one can infer that from the date of this might have been very close to the first time they'd been sexually intimate, and we know that by around about a month and a half later, so around about 6 weeks later, she was texting her friend Charlotte to say she's hooked and it's the best sex she's ever had. So it was 6 weeks of love and romance, but where sex was also part of that repertoire, if one wants to put it that way, and clearly that was an aspect they both seemed to enjoy. And we know that one of the things Watts said about Kessinger is that he felt that she let him be himself, he could be himself around her, and he didn't feel that way about Shanann. And the sexual aspect is, I think, an important part of that. Again, whether you believe him or not, in any relationship where one can be oneself sexually, that certainly is gratifying, and it makes for a more enjoyable, intimate, warm and authentic relationship. Okay, and then just to finalize this part of the discovery, there's just a short little section where Kessinger quickly refers to going to the Watts residence and feeling as if she didn't belong there, and I think that's quite significant. I think she's also just being honest about how she felt there, and Watts now has to reassure her that she's not coming second and she does belong, but she's going to want reassurance. She's going to want to be convinced that she does belong. And how is she going to be convinced? Well, if he promises to sell his house, if he promises to move out, if he promises that there is a divorce happening. And of course he can't really make any of those promises because Shanann is in control of all those things. She's in control of whether they get divorced or not. The pregnancy is a huge barrier for her, in her mind, Shanann's mind, and for them as a married couple. And then of course the debt situation has them both trapped in maybe a loveless marriage, maybe a sexless marriage, but Kessinger wants to know, where do I belong in this equation? And you guys can refer to the video I did dealing with this specifically about Kessinger feeling that she wanted to be first in Watts' life, and I think that was a clear and present demand, and we see it also in text with Charlotte that she's also saying about coming second best on the 12th of August, so as late as then, despite the sexual aspect being so good in inverted commas, Kessinger had insecurity about how does he really feel about me, and I think he did feel strongly about her and he wanted to prove it. In fact, he may have felt so strongly that he totally over-delivered and totally went overboard in trying to do what was whatever craziness was going on in his mind. And that wraps up this episode. Thank you for listening. For those interested in the way that I've dealt with the discovery in the narratives, there's some good news. The book Annihilation has just come out in paperback, so it's the second book in the 9-part Two-Face series that's available in paperback. The other one's Oblivion, so you can go ahead and purchase that. Silver Fox, the latest book in a new series, has just gotten its 7th review, and as a result of this 5-star review, it draws level with Annihilation as the highest reviewed, best reviewed book of the Two-Face series at 4.2 out of 5 stars. And just to address the last review, I'm really grateful for this review. It's really a nice review from an author's perspective. It's well thought out, and someone went to a little bit of effort to write it. And I'm not going to read the whole review. You guys can check it out yourselves. But one part that I appreciate is she refers to a fresh viewpoint that drowns out the illogical choruses of cacophonous voices surrounding this case. And so this short YouTube video, in a way, was also to just provide a transparent look at the discovery and just be very clear about what we're talking about and what it refers to. I don't know whether some of these YouTubers intentionally don't anchor what they're saying in the actual discovery, but by doing that, it gives them leeway to sort of make things up as they go along, and it also gives them leeway to not be accurate about what they're talking about. And that's why I do it completely differently. Everything I say is anchored in evidence, it's anchored in media reports, it's anchored in images or video or footage, and although I'm analyzing actual information, I'm also leaving it to you to go there yourself and decide whether you agree with my assessment or not, and then to take that assessment, right or wrong, to a logical step forward, and then say, how does this integrate with everything else that we know or that we suspect we know? And in this way we sort of knit together a fabric which sort of integrates everything that we know, the psychology, the identity of these people, the discovery, what the district attorney said, some of the elements of Chris Watts' confession, some of elements of what others have said, some things Kessinger said, and then put that all together and distill it into something that makes the most sense. And that's really all it is. It's taking all the information, anchoring it in reference sources, and then saying which version of this makes the most sense. And that's why there have been 10 successive books, is each successive version builds on the previous one and then says, we've now got this additional information, and your image then sort of pixelates into a more fine-tuned version of what likely happened. And so the most fine-tuned version thus far is Silver Fox. And so I want to encourage you guys to check it out, especially if you've enjoyed this video. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, share amongst your networks, and thanks for listening. By the way, stay tuned, watch this space for updates on the Patrick Frazee trial. Today again is trial day 7, and I'll be providing a summary once the day is done, and I've sort of collated and compiled all the information around trial day 7. It should be an interesting day with all the forensic evidence and so on. So keep your eyes open for that.